everybody, this is Lord Phantom here, and today we're doing a creepypasta called Super Mario 64 Full Reset. Now this creepypasta is by an unknown author, so I'm going to be putting in the video description or whatever, the video title really, and this story is going to be in third person, I believe so. Or first person, really. Because it's a weird story and I'm gonna roll with it. So, we'll see how this goes. Johnny, you could say, is a rather disturbed teenager. Diagnosed with ADHD as a young child, he had no friends to speak of. He went to a special school for gifted kids. He didn't have many interests other than the simple pleasure of video games from time to time. He would play the nights away until they bothered him no more, and owned 8 different vintage gaming consoles, almost all of them bought secondhand. He never had the money as a younger child to buy the consoles new. Most of them he had now were from collections other than his own. He was only missing one from his abundant repertoire: a Nintendo 64. Having bought a copy of Super Mario 64 from a local second-hand antique gaming store some time ago, he was itching to play it badly. The game was entirely normal looking, just a bit dusty and chipped, about the expected look for its age. He had been harboring this game for so many weeks that it was crying at the back of his mind. Eventually, he couldn't hold back anymore. He looked online and went around to 5 or 6 different shops to try and get an old Nintendo 64. He searched and searched, but to his dismay, most of them either had broken ones, mainly with display, or hacked handheld devices that played Nintendo 64 ROMs. Johnny was disappointed at every turn, but wasn't about to just give up. He ran to the shop where he bought his copy of Super Mario 64 from, and to his surprise, they had a system available. It looked utterly ordinary, all except for the research button. For the reset button, which seemed cracked in some unmentionable way. The clerk warned Johnny that this system was recently given to them by an old collector. He told Johnny that the reset button was stuck somewhat. The Nintendo 64 might restart without warning. The clerk objected to selling it and told Johnny he would be dropping it off to be dismantled for spare parts later that week, but Johnny was desperate. He paid full price to have the machine and brought it home as fast as he could run. When Johnny arrived home after he got to his room to go to sleep, he took out his Nintendo 64 and began to install it into an adjacent wall. He connected it to his TV and inserted his copy of Super Mario 64 into the slot. The game opened up normally. The title screen was not anything severely unusual. He began a new game and started playing. He was so excited to begin playing that he couldn't contain himself. After all these weeks of anticipation, here it was. He was jumping on Goombas, dodging the chain chomp in the first level, and accumulated 3 stars before losing life. That is when things began to act somewhat odd. As the death animation was playing and Bowser's silhouette taking the screen with his maniacal chiptune laughter midway through it, the game suddenly and unexpectedly seemed to cut away as though it had reset. The strange part being that, instead of cutting to the title screen, it just cut straight into the middle of Mario's idle animation as he was standing outside the castle. In the exact spot you would normally be in if you had just loaded up the game. The reset cut directly into the middle of the castle yard theme, and it was all very jarring and creepy. Nonetheless, Johnny decided it was a simple fluke. It was way too caught up in his rush of excitement and adrenaline in playing the game that he forgot about within 30 seconds. For a second, he feared that the reset may have caused him to lose his progress, but surprisingly, all his stats were entirely intact, as though pulled from a moment just before he entered the last level. He didn't even lose a life. The same behavior went on as Johnny played more and more levels. The game would suck him smack dab at the start of the game whenever he died, with all his previous stats intact. Eventually, Johnny got used to this behavior after about the 8th death, and played the game with no second thoughts as to why it acted like this. He even considered it hardcore, since levels were effectively useless. But it seemed such a strange way to accomplish this effect that he put the thought aside. Johnny was having the time of his life playing this game. Not only he had been waiting weeks to do so, but it presented him with this new, interesting challenge that he bet no one else had ever experienced. Of course, other than the previous owner. He began to think about how they could have broken the system in such a way for it to act strangely when Johnny noticed something weird that seemed less so a glitch. The toads that would normally stand around the castle and happily greet Mario were, instead of hopping up and down cheerfully at the mere chance of being able to talk to him, wear this interesting solemn look upon their faces, and their idling animations were somehow more dull and slowed down. They wouldn't look directly at Mario until he spoke to them. Either. When Johnny tried talking to them, they would all start a little near the beginning of their text blocks, but by the middle or near the end would show this barely noticeable head-shaking animation and act perfectly normal, as though trying to forget something horrible that recently befell someone they knew. Maybe someone close? If Johnny tried talking to the toads again afterwards, they would all act pretty normal, perfectly, as though nothing was in any way wrong. Johnny had about 21 deaths tallied up now, and are ignoring it superficially. He knew it inside that any problems totaled up with this particular Nintendo 64 did not just sum to a broken reset button. 36 going on 37 deaths and 37 resets. Johnny paid closer attention to the toads each time he entered the castle. They seemed sadder and more devoid of their usual cheery selves each time he died, and the game reset. Eventually, they stopped trying to push off the burden they had been holding back for so long, and had severe trouble talking to Mario. One even burst into tears at the mere sight of him. Johnny was mortified by the whole nature of the situation, and in the combination of pure fear, amazement, and the initial adrenaline rush from plugging the game in, decided to dig deeper into the heart of this monstrosity, only to his own fault he would later have to blame. It took a while, but Johnny eventually reached the final star door on the castle with enough stars to enter. He burned through more than 65 depths, but it seemed worth it at the time. Johnny was almost ecstatic to beat Bowser one last time. But in light of his current situation, felt a lonely seed of remorse and decided to check up on the toads for the last time. Johnny walked back down the wide, never-ending staircase into the large circular room surrounding it, and saw to his surprise some of the toads were missing. In fact, almost every single one was nowhere to be found. He ran around and tried looking everywhere, but can only find a total of the 3 of the toads remaining, the one at the front door, one by the large grandfather clock, and the one near Jolly Roger Bay. These toads were acting far from normal. One was sprawled on the ground, crying incessantly, of which Mario was even unable to initiate chat with. Another, leaning against the wall with a thick stream of tears falling from their eyes, was looking down and trying to forget the horrible tragedy that had recently occurred. If Mario tried talking to him, the toad would not even look up. He would merely murmur something intelligible, and then yell at Mario for disturbing him in this time of despair. The third one just stood there with wide, blank eyes, and his animation was barely noticeable, if he at all even had one. Mario cannot even initiate conservation with this one either. But the strangest part was that by pressing the A button to talk, Mario cannot talk. So instead he would attack. Instead of passing harmlessly through the Toad as an accidental attack might, Mario knocked Toad over to the ground, and he tumbled helplessly on the floor for a few seconds before rolling face up with that same interminable stare. This Toad was practically a statue with nothing to give, nor gain from any future encounters. Johnny felt severe remorse for this one especially, for he knew from the depths of his heart that this Toad would almost definitely be next. The most notable part about this was that Mario himself. Although the behavior of the various Toads remaining in the castle have changed dramatically with the preceding gameplay, neither Mario's disposition or animations altered one bit. He seemed perfectly aloof and naive about the whole situation, as though it had barely grazed him. He was neither sad for the Toads' loss, nor happy that they were gone. He just didn't give a fuck. To stare into his perfectly arrogant and mentally sane face in light of the current horrendous situation was maddening in itself. Even when others, it made it seem absolutely acceptable. No part of Mario's body language even slightly alluded to his differed feelings towards what was happening. It was almost as if he didn't even know what was going on at all. Johnny was no longer happy about any of this. He was absolutely mortified by every minute detail. Whether or not he experienced any of them consciously or otherwise, he was not moving on because he wanted to complete the game anymore. On the contrary, he wanted to stop playing as soon as possible. But his body wouldn't let him. The grip of unadulterated fear held tighter and tighter with each passing death. And after a while, Johnny forgot he was even playing a game. He just assumed to be dreaming this whole situation, all the while glued to his old, noisy scan-line television screen. Subconsciously controlling what he thought was a direct projection of himself into this fearsome world. Johnny was not awake anymore, but his brain continued playing, whether he wanted to or not. Regrouping all the emotional reserve that existed within his feeble psyche, he ran up to the final star door guarding Bowser's stage and marked the long hallway towards an enticing picture of Princess Peach. Could he finally have her back, he wondered discontentedly, as he fell down a deep chasm from a trapdoor that opened up under him, tricked by Bowser again. There was no level below him. He fell for what he felt to be an eternity. All the while, the accumulated weight of past events he had desperately been trying to suppress, were quickly creeping up on him, and an unavoidable paranoia onset almost immediately as saw the fate before him. For as clear as the brightest day, there was a heavy spike smeared with thick black blood, lining the bottom of the pit. Mario saw it, knew he couldn't escape its grasp. Falling all the while, he imagined what it would be like to be able to fly. If only he could fly now, he thought, such as a spike impaled upon his brittle skull. There was no escape. There never was. Not from this game. And then the game reset. So what did I think about this Super Mario 64 creepypasta? Super Mario 64 full reset. Well, the story is actually a pretty interesting thing, and it is from a first person sort of view. You have this kid named Johnny that has a disability that hyperfixates on stuff, even video games. So when he starts, having these weird problems happen in the game, you think it's stereotypical, yes, but it also has a rich history, a rich drawer in here that actually does do its job properly. You don't have a hardcore fan being scared of a game at first. You have a teenager that is realistically scared and does not know what's going on. Instead of a full grown adult here like in Sonic.exe. This kid, this Johnny guy, he is the Doom Slayer of this creepypasta. He doesn't give a fuck until something goes fucking wrong. Until the crying toads aspect starts coming in, and then he starts getting freaked out, which is realistic. But I do like how it ends. Because then that means either Johnny died or Mario died, and he just took it back to the game shop, which is probably what would have fucking happened in the end anyway, because nobody likes that. Super Mario 64 was a creepy game, but at least it adds to the creepiness. It adds to the creepiness. So what will I give this creepypasta? An 8 out of 10 for its build up, its creepiness, and for it actually including a person with a disability. But the story is actually still very good. It just has a lot of things in here. And the protagonist is actually pretty fucking smart here. He doesn't get scared by a single fucking light switch. So yeah, this is an 8 out of 10. And I will see you guys next time for my next creepypasta, which is Kirby's Deadland 2, which is probably going to suck even more than the first one, so be prepared for that. So I'll see you guys next time, and also, don't forget about my presents.